Pirates of the Caribbean is recognized as one of Disney's most successful franchises. And with the current state of limbo that the franchise is in due to the highly controversial and widely covered Johnny Depp vs. Amber Heard trial, there's really no better time to take a look at one of Depp's most iconic characters and the franchise that introduced us to
Captain Jack Sparrow.
Captain Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow.
Captain Jack Sparrow.
For fans of the franchise, this is going to be your one-stop refresher on the storyline and canon of the films. And if you're new to the franchise or looking to get caught up on the 5 films within it, look no further. Today, we're going to break down what the f you need to know about the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Pirates of the Caribbean follows the many adventures of the Turner family and Captain Jack Sparrow as they travel the high seas in search of ancient relics and priceless treasure. Of course, each film would have its own main plot and overall goal, but what makes this franchise work is the tremendous balance between Disney's love for using proven formulas to mass-produce franchise films, and giving the movie its own defining moments and characters that make each installment feel like it has its own identity. You can clearly count on each film delivering stunning visuals, fun stunts and action scenes, sword fights, double crosses, and some kind of undead pirate as the main villain. But with each movie, the characters and their ultimate motivation shift and evolve as the characters grow. This makes the entire franchise feel more episodic and less redundant. You know what else never feels redundant? Liking and subscribing to JoBlo for the best in movie content. Go ahead and ring that bell and let's raise those black sails. But before we can really talk about the Pirates movies, we need to take a look at where it all started. The Pirates of the Caribbean started as a theme park ride at Disneyland in 1967. The ride is one of Disney's most famous attractions and has seen multiple novels, films, and additional rides at Disney parks in places like Florida, Tokyo, and Shanghai over the years that are still relevant to Disney fans today. The success of the ride didn't exactly have much to do with the creation of the first film, however. In the late 90s, 2 filmmakers by the names of Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio were looking to put some kind of science fiction spin on the traditional pirate film genre, but couldn't seem to get their ideas into the hands of any studios. We'll come back to them later. By the year 2001, Disney was looking to make a film based on their ride and hired screenwriter Joe Wolpert to write a script based on the supernatural story by Michael Haynes, Brigham Taylor, and Josh Harmon, who were also set to be executives on the film. But the original idea was to make a straight-to-video film about a blacksmith named William Turner who has no choice but to team up with an infamous pirate named Jack Sparrow in order to rescue his love from a group of undead pirates. The original plan was to have a much lower budget, and Matthew McConaughey was set as Jack Sparrow, and if the film did end up going to theaters, we would have seen Christopher Walken as the mumbling drunken pirate. It's hard to imagine the Pirates franchise without the iconic performances that Johnny Depp gave, and it's safe to say that if Disney knew the amount of cash that these films would bring into the box office over the years, they would never have even considered going straight to video. When famous Hollywood producer Jerry Bruckheimer was approached to produce, he initially declined, saying that the script was a straight pirate movie and was lacking any interesting takes on the genre. Remember Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio? Well, they finally got their chance to work on a supernatural pirate film when they were hired to rewrite the script with Stuart Beattie in order to make the story more fantastical, which they did by adding the movie's curse and the undead pirates to the main storyline. In 2002, Disney hired Gore Verbinski to direct, who you may know from The Ring, Rango, and A Cure for Wellness. With a fresh new script and a brilliant team of filmmakers with their sights on making a revolutionary pirate film, it was time to walk the plank of production. The first entry in the Pirates franchise was Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl, and this movie was a smash f***ing hit. The story follows Will Turner, played by Orlando Bloom, a humble blacksmith and skilled swordsman, as he enlists the help of an unlikely ally, Captain Jack Sparrow, in order to rescue his childhood friend and romantic interest, Elizabeth Swann, played by Keira Knightley, who has been kidnapped by a group of undead pirates led by Captain Barbossa, played by Jeffrey Rush. And they're seeking out an ancient treasure that can ultimately break their undead curse. Along the way, we learn of some family history for Will, ulterior motives for Jack, and of course, lots and lots of rum.
Aye, the rum too!
This movie should be your starting place if you're new to the franchise, as it establishes all of our main characters and their individual stories. Even some of the movie's side characters that seem like they only exist to serve the main player's narratives end up popping in and out of other movies and getting individual character arcs. Specifically, the side character of Commodore Norrington, who had a great storyline that tracks across multiple films. The first film opened in theaters on July 9th, 2003, and despite being predicted to be a flop as the pirate genre had been dead for years, the film opened up at number 1, pulling in $47 million on its first weekend. It's estimated that the movie has sold over 50 million tickets across the US, and moviegoers everywhere were apparently watching this movie.
Couldn't resist, mate.
I remember seeing it in theaters when I was like 10 and thinking that pirates were cool for the first time since the Goonies. The Curse of the Black Pearl would go on to make a lifetime box office sum of $654 million off of a $140 million budget. The film was praised widely and still holds a place on the screens of many households. I rewatched this movie for the 1000th time while doing research for this video, and I must say that the film is absolutely gorgeous and still so exciting.
To the Black Pearl.
The success of The Black Pearl would, of course, lead to the green light for a follow-up film. Dead Man's Chest picks up shortly after the end of the first film and sees Will, played again by Orlando Bloom, and Elizabeth, played again by Keira Knightley. They're trying to get married and seemingly move on from the pirate life while Jack is at sea once again as captain of the Black Pearl. But the wedding is interrupted by the ordered arrest of Will, Elizabeth, and Commodore Norrington for the aiding of Jack Sparrow in the previous film. Elizabeth escapes and accidentally boards the Flying Dutchman, which is a haunted pirate ship captained by the movie's antagonist, Davy Jones.
I am the sea.
So it's up to Will to find Jack and rescue Elizabeth once again. This movie followed the successful beats of the first film and stands today as the film that is most similar to the original. The ultimate story beats are pretty much the same, but the movie does what any good sequel should do. Cranks the first movie up to 11. Seeing as the main players both in front and behind the camera return for this movie, it was expected to be good, and man, it delivered. We also saw another developing trope in this franchise when it's discovered that Jack again has some ulterior motives that lead to a double cross within the core team. Oh, also, the crew has multiple fights with the f***ing Kraken. It's visually some of the most beautiful visual camera work that Disney has ever produced, ever. Of course, the plan for Disney was to continue making these box office blockbusters, so the movie's story, while having a great amount of emotional impact and drama, it mainly left the main characters unharmed by the end. The film was released 3 years after the first movie and made over $1 billion worldwide and quickly locked in its place in the top 3 highest grossing films of the 2000s, and in fact, it was the highest grossing film of 2006. Critically, the film didn't do as well as the first one, but in my opinion, it's just as much fun and even more visually stunning, so make sure you watch it. Okay, now this movie is interesting. This film was released just 1 year after the previous one, and it was also the final film in what I call the Gore Verbinski trilogy. Something about this movie felt super strange to me when I saw it in theaters. I didn't know if in the 4 years since the previous film I had just outgrown the demographic of the movies, or if the movie itself was just a strange installment. First of all, this film is much darker and strays a bit further away from the usual formula. The story again picks up shortly after the previous film. It establishes that Jack is under captivity after being tricked by Elizabeth in the last movie. Commodore Norrington and the Navy are in control of Davy Jones, and Will and Elizabeth, still unmarried, are aboard the Black Pearl with the crew, now led by Captain Barbossa, a returning character from the first film who is another personal favorite of mine.
Diane is the day worth living for.
Our core team is kind of refocused as well. Elizabeth and Will get a big piece of the story with less focus on Jack and his drunken, incompetent antics. Although, don't worry, there's still plenty of that.
The immortal Captain Sparrow. Ooh, I like that.
This film stands out by not only being much darker, it also feels very much like the end of a trilogy. The film wraps up pretty much every main storyline and leaves it fairly bookended for the original trilogy. Will Turner is fatally injured by Davy Jones, Elizabeth is left pregnant with their child, Jack and Barbossa are freed, and the movie ends. Oh yeah, but there's also a post-credit scene in this movie which reveals that Elizabeth and her now 10-year-old son Henry are able to visit Will's ghost every 10 years on the shore when he returns aboard the Dutchman, which Will is now the captain of. Fans and critics seem to enjoy this dark installment less than the original two, with critics saying that it had way too many spinning plates to successfully develop each character. It did, however, become the highest grossing film of 2007 and pulled in a box office total of $963 million off of a budget of $300 million. This was indeed the highest budgeted Pirates movie at the time, and many audience members would agree that it is one of the most beautiful looking Pirates films today. The most recent two films are different from the original three, but still carry the main continuity of the story. These movies are interesting to me because of the change in director, and you can feel that this fourth movie is attempting to deliver something different while still honoring the previous installments. kind of. After making the first 3 installments, Gore Verbinski declined to return for the next film and was replaced by Rob Marshall, who had previously directed Chicago and Memoirs of a Geisha. While Disney wanted to, quote, return to form for the 4th feature, the continuity of the previous movie, which in my opinion was kind of the end game for the franchise, left the series feeling bookended and over. Now, luckily for Rob Marshall, Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, remember Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio? Well, they were still attached to the franchise, and if anyone could figure out how to revive a story that had already ended, it was the original writers. So in order to make a familiar Pirates movie without having some of the main players, the film introduced us to a new adventure with some familiar faces and then fills the gap left by Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley with a hot pirate and a sad mermaid. But they do crank the magical elements up, and the visuals are very epic and they feel huge in scope, so that's a plus. At the time, this was not only the most expensive Pirates of the Caribbean movie ever to be made, or even the most expensive Disney movie ever to be made. When this film was released on May 20th, 2011, it was set to be the most expensive movie ever made, with a budget of $378.5 million.
Yes.
To date, this is still the most expensive movie ever made, but it is worth mentioning that the Hobbit trilogy shot all 3 of those films back to back to back, so technically the Hobbit trilogy is like the most expensive rolling production, but Pirates 4, the most expensive movie ever made. But if you look at the franchise as a whole, this movie sort of doesn't affect very much as far as the overall story, and it feels somewhat like the cast that did return, like Johnny Depp and Jeffrey Rush. They don't feel as intense and interesting in this movie. In fact, Barbossa's character changes a lot from movie to movie, which usually makes it interesting, and this movie is his most contrasting performance if you compare it to the original one. I think visually this movie used the budget very well, and the special effects needed to pull off such beautiful and magical visuals are absolutely breathtaking. But it just doesn't make me feel anything for the characters, and seeing as most of the people introduced in this story don't return for the next film, it's clear that this was just an attempt to have Johnny Depp carry the franchise on his own.
I have no say in it, Gibbs. It's a pirate's life for me. Savvy.
The final film, Dead Men Tell No Tales, was marketed as the final installment in the Pirates franchise, and to this day, it is. The movie was released in 2017, about 15 years after the original film, and Disney seemed to want to give Depp's Jack Sparrow one last swing across the deck as his iconic pirate. This film does give us some of Jack Sparrow's history, but it also does the classic Disney move of explaining the origins for the tiniest and most unnecessary details, which I find annoying. And I really think that this film just came out a bit too late in the franchise to make the same level of impact as the first movie. This movie holds many of the same tropes that we've come to expect from these swashbuckling sailors, including the key characters from throughout the franchise showing up, epic escapism from Jack, mistrust, double crosses, and, of course,
Make ready! Present!
the film was visually very impressive, but for many of us, it just didn't have the soul that the first films did. It felt like Disney's attempt to capitalize on audiences' willingness to sit through origin stories of all of our favorite nostalgic characters. It's still pretty good, honestly, but it just didn't give me the same edge of my seat feeling. However, the villain of this movie was an absolute standout. Javier Bardem plays Captain Salazar, a Spanish pirate hunter who was crossed and killed after an encounter with Jack Sparrow, now seeking his revenge from beyond his watery grave.
And from that day he earned himself a name that would haunt me for the rest of my days. Jack Sparrow.
So now that we know what each film brings to the table, let's take a look at some key characters and recurring things from the franchise that you'll want to know about. Pirate, con artist, escapist, and lover of adventure and rum, Jack is our top billed character and one of the only characters to appear in every single installment. You know him, you love him, and you've probably done a drunken impression of him.
Where's the rum gone?
Moving on. Will Turner is our straight man in the series and goes from being a young orphaned blacksmith to a crew member on the Black Pearl to the undead captain of the Flying Dutchman to the father and husband to Henry, his son, and Elizabeth, his romantic interest and key player in the movie. One of the only other characters to appear in every single film, Barbossa is Jack's enemy as often as his ally. But he gets a full story arc and heartwarming redemption in the final act of the final movie. Barbossa wants to maintain his dominion over the Black Pearl at first, but along the way his motivations change. Probably my favorite character that isn't one of the main characters. Tia Dalma is a voodoo practitioner who holds a dark secret. she's actually Calypso, the goddess of the seas and lover of Davy Jones. She's weird, gross, scary, and giant? Often the comic relief, Gibbs is Jack's right-hand man and reoccurring character that gives off heavy Smee vibes from Peter Pan. Every great story needs a pair of side characters that can be idiots, comic relief, or even heroes. These two gentlemen find themselves along for the ride as Jack's semi-loyal but always reliable crewmates. The villain in two of the better films in this franchise, Davy Jones is a visually captivating character whose depth and wavering loyalties make him the Thanos of the franchise. The same way that we hear folks say that Gotham City was its own character in the Batman, the same can easily be said about the Black Pearl in the Pirates franchise. Safe to say that whoever the true captain of the Black Pearl is must have a boatload of memories on that ship. Key moments.
You will always remember this as the day that you almost caught Captain Jack Sparrow.
Throughout the franchise, we get many incredible sequences where Jack has to escape some sort of captivity, and although they defy physics and logic sometimes, they're a standout piece of the Pirates franchise. The Wooden Eye. It's not always common to have an inconsequential side character who carries a gag throughout an entire series, but that's exactly what happened here with the Wooden Eye, and it gave it a similar status as the Golden Snitch in the Harry Potter franchise. The Kraken. This could have been a character, but really it's more of an obstacle that our characters face in the second film. Either way, it stands to reason that this is one of the best spectacles on display out of all of the movies. Sword fighting. You couldn't make a pirate film without some exciting sword fighting, and of course, this film delivers intense swashbuckling and fight scenes across every single film, with spectacle always being at the forefront of these creative decisions. Double crosses. Similar to a heist movie, there is no shortage of backstabbing in this franchise, and just when you think you know what to expect, another double cross goes down and shakes your trust in every single character. Happens to me every time. Now, of course, the best possible way to get every detail of this long-going story is to revisit the franchise for yourself. But if you're like all of my friends and you don't have time to go back and watch all of it, here's what we at JoBlo consider to be required viewing, and here's what you can probably skip. Now, this is fairly easy. If you want to understand the magic and mystery that is the Pirates franchise, watch the original 3 films directed by Gore Verbinski. The Curse of the Black Pearl, Dead Man's Chest, and At World's End embody everything required to make an amazing trilogy. Everyone's arc wraps up nice and clean, and the tone of the films is unique across the trilogy. The most recent 2 films, On Stranger Tides and Dead Men Tell No Tales, are definitely worth a watch if you have the time, but if you have to skip some, these are the ones that you can scrap from the list, and the main story would be mostly unchanged. And with that, there is no word on the future of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, but Disney's recent Jungle Cruise film did seem to kick up some interest in the revival of family-friendly adventure films with magic, undead enemies, and superstar casts doing superstar things. There have been some rumors surrounding the internet that Margot Robbie is in talks to lead a new Pirates of the Caribbean film after the announcement was made at a Disney press event in 2020. However, there hasn't been much news about it since, leaving fans of the franchise wondering if Disney has the guts to make a Pirates film without Johnny Depp. Speaking of Johnny Depp, he was fired from the franchise in 2017.
Not sure I deserve that.
But has recently been seeing his fans take to the internet to praise him and show support for the character.
I may have deserved that.
However, Johnny has stated that he wouldn't return to the franchise under any circumstances, not even if they paid him $300 million. I don't know about you guys, but there's very little I wouldn't do for that kind of money. I even heard a rumor that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson would be replacing Depp and taking on the role of Captain Jack Sparrow in a future franchise. I mean, I like The Rock and all, but it's basically what you do in Jungle Cruise, so just do it in Jungle Cruise, you know? But if we don't see another one of these films for a while, I think it's safe to say that the 5 films, 1 short film, video games, and board games that we do have are more than enough to remind us that somewhere in the ocean, Jack Sparrow is probably drunk on rum, stabbing someone in the back right now. And that knowledge makes my world a better place. So that, my friends, is what the f*** you need to know about the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Thank you for watching. Make sure you check back soon for another episode.
Drink up me hearty, Joe.